The DNA results came back. The glove found near Nancy Guthrie's home. The glove that investigators hoped would lead them directly to whoever took her. The glove that contained DNA that was extracted and analyzed and entered into databases and processed through forensic genealogy. That glove does not belong to the suspect. Sheriff Nanos confirmed on Wednesday, March 5th, that the DNA has been traced to a restaurant worker who has no connection to Nancy's case. A restaurant worker who works near Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills, but who is not involved in her disappearance. The DNA that investigators spent weeks analyzing, the DNA that represented one of the most promising pieces of physical evidence from the crime scene, does not lead to the perpetrator. And on the same day the DNA ruling came back eliminating what appeared to be a major lead, TMZ received another ransom demand. Not the crude handwritten notes from early February demanding $6 million with a deadline that passed without payment, but what TMZ describes as a highly sophisticated demand involving cryptocurrency different from Bitcoin, containing graphic descriptions of consequences if ransom is not paid, professionally constructed in a way that the earlier notes were not. The fourth ransom communication in this case, if we count all the demands that have been reported. The fourth attempt to extract money from a family that is desperately searching for an 84-year-old woman who has been missing for over a month. And while these developments were unfolding, while DNA results were disappointing investigators, and while new ransom demands were arriving at media outlets, Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show studio for the first time since her mother disappeared 35 days ago, not to resume her role as co-anchor, not to appear on air in front of millions of viewers, but to be with her colleagues, to thank them for their support during the most difficult period of her life, to reconnect with the professional family that has surrounded her with care while her actual family faces unimaginable trauma. Three major developments on day 35 of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. DNA evidence that does not match the suspect, but that eliminates one avenue of investigation while others remain open. A new ransom demand more sophisticated and more threatening than previous attempts, but still lacking the proof of life that would indicate legitimacy. And Savannah's emotional return to the place where she has worked for over a decade, facing colleagues who care about her while her mother remains gone, and while hope becomes harder to maintain with each passing day. Each development tells us something about where this investigation stands and what investigators are facing and what obstacles they are encountering and what the family is enduring. And together they paint a picture of a case that is far from solved, that continues to produce new evidence and new leads while also eliminating possibilities that seemed promising, that involves ongoing communication from someone claiming to hold Nancy or to know where she is, and that has taken an emotional toll on a family that is trying to maintain hope while facing the reality that 35 days have passed without finding an 84-year-old woman who was taken from her home in the middle of the night on February 1st, 2026. If you want to understand what the DNA ruling on day 35 actually means for the investigation, and whether other DNA evidence still offers hope of identifying the perpetrator, what a highly sophisticated ransom demand looks like, and why this fourth communication is different from the earlier crude attempts, and what the specification of a cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin tells us about who might be sending these demands, what Savannah's return to the Today Show studio tells us about how the family is coping 5 weeks into this ordeal, and what her message to colleagues reveals about where they stand emotionally and whether they still believe Nancy can be found alive. What the ongoing door-to-door searches and the use of metal detectors inside Nancy's home indicate about what investigators are still looking for and what evidence they believe might exist that initial searches did not find. And what all of these day 35 developments combined tell us about the realistic likelihood of finding Nancy and identifying who took her after 5 weeks of intensive investigation. Then subscribe to True Crime Vault right now. This channel provides factual evidence-based coverage of major cases as they develop without speculation or sensationalism or jumping to conclusions that evidence does not support. Hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications because this case continues to produce significant developments on a weekly basis, and you want to understand what each piece of news actually means for the investigation and for Nancy's family, and how each development fits into the larger picture of what happened on February 1st. Hit the like button as well because comprehensive coverage of complex cases like this deserves to reach everyone following Nancy's disappearance and everyone who wants to understand how investigations work when initial leads do not produce immediate results. and when cases extend into weeks and months. And comment below with your thoughts on whether the new ransom demand is legitimate from someone who actually has Nancy, or another fake attempt from someone exploiting the situation, and whether you believe Nancy is still alive after 35 days, or whether the investigation has shifted to recovery of remains rather than rescue. Now let us examine each of the major Day 35 developments in comprehensive detail, starting with the DNA ruling that eliminates what appeared to be significant evidence. Sheriff Chris Nanos of Pima County held a briefing on Wednesday, March 5th, Day 33 of Nancy's disappearance, and confirmed information that had been developing over the preceding days about DNA analysis results. A glove that was found approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home, roughly 3 kilometers using the metric measurement that the Fox 10 article employs, contained DNA that was extracted and analyzed by forensic laboratories working on this case. That DNA was profiled using standard forensic genetic techniques that identify specific markers in the genetic code that are highly variable between individuals and that create a unique genetic fingerprint for each person. That DNA profile was entered into CODIS, the combined DNA index system that is maintained by the FBI, and that contains DNA profiles from convicted offenders in all 50 states, from arrestees in states that collect DNA at the time of arrest rather than waiting for conviction, and from evidence collected at crime scenes in unsolved cases across the country. The CODIS database contains millions of profiles, and sophisticated search algorithms can compare a new profile against all existing profiles to look for matches. The CODIS search on the DNA from the glove did not produce a match. That means whoever's DNA was present in that glove has never been convicted of a felony in a state that requires DNA collection from convicted felons. It means that person has never been arrested in a jurisdiction that takes DNA samples from arrestees. And it means that person is not connected to other unsolved crimes that have DNA evidence entered in CODIS. For many criminals, especially those with prior convictions, CODIS searches produce immediate identification. The profile from new evidence matches a profile already in the system from a previous case, and you instantly know who you are looking for. But when CODIS searches fail to produce matches, which happens frequently when dealing with first-time offenders or with people who have never been arrested or convicted, investigators move to other methods of DNA analysis. One method is forensic genealogy, which has revolutionized cold case investigation in recent years. Forensic genealogy involves uploading the DNA profile to public genealogy databases like GEDmatch or Family Tree DNA, where millions of people have voluntarily submitted their DNA to find relatives and explore ancestry. The investigative profile gets compared against all those voluntary submissions looking for genetic matches that indicate shared ancestry. Those matches are typically not the suspect themselves, but distant relatives, third cousins, fourth cousins, people who share a common ancestor with the suspect several generations back. Forensic genealogists then build family trees using traditional genealogical research methods, working backward from the genetic matches to find common ancestors, and then working forward through all the descendants of those ancestors to identify everyone alive today who could potentially be the source of the crime scene DNA. That list gets filtered by age, sex, geographic location, and other characteristics known about the suspect to narrow to a manageable number of candidates who can then be investigated directly. In the case of the glove found 2 miles from Nancy's home, investigators apparently did not go through the full forensic genealogy process, or if they did, it was abbreviated because they found a different way to identify the DNA source. Sheriff Nanos stated that the DNA has been traced to a restaurant worker who works at an establishment near Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson. How that identification was made is not specified in the reporting. It could be that the restaurant worker was interviewed as part of general canvassing of businesses in the area and voluntarily provided a DNA sample for comparison. It could be that the worker had DNA on file for some other reason and investigators cross-referenced. It could be that forensic genealogy produced the identification. The method is not disclosed. What Sheriff Nanos stated explicitly and unambiguously is that this restaurant worker has no connection to Nancy's case. The person is not a suspect. The person is not being investigated as involved in Nancy's disappearance. The person is not someone who knew Nancy or who had any relationship with her. The person simply lost or discarded a glove at some point, probably while walking to or from work or while on break from the restaurant, in the general area where it was later found by investigators conducting systematic searches for evidence related to Nancy's disappearance. That glove was collected as potential evidence because investigators in missing persons cases, especially in cases involving suspected abduction like Nancy's, collect everything in the surrounding area that might possibly be relevant. A glove found within a reasonable radius of the crime scene could potentially have been dropped by the suspect while fleeing. Gloves worn during the crime to avoid leaving fingerprints might be removed and discarded once the perpetrator feels far enough from the scene that they no longer need that protection. So collecting the glove and testing it made perfect sense investigatively, even though it ultimately turned out not to be connected. This is a setback for the investigation, but it is important to understand exactly what it means, and equally important to understand what it does not mean. What it means is that one specific piece of potential evidence has been eliminated as a lead. The glove found approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home does not lead to the suspect who took her. The DNA extracted from that glove does not point toward whoever committed this crime. That particular avenue of investigation, the avenue of tracing DNA from that glove to identify a perpetrator, has reached a dead end. Resources that were devoted to analyzing that glove and identifying the DNA source can now be redirected to other evidence. What this DNA ruling does not mean is that all DNA evidence in this case is gone or exhausted. What it does not mean is that the investigation has no physical evidence to pursue. What it does not mean is that DNA will not ultimately solve this case. Sheriff Nanos specifically and explicitly stated during his Wednesday briefing that other gloves found during searches are still being tested at a private laboratory in Florida. Those other gloves, plural, meaning at least 2 and possibly more, might contain DNA that is relevant to identifying who took Nancy. The results of testing on those other gloves are pending. They have not come back yet. Analysis is still ongoing. So while this particular glove turned out not to be connected, other gloves remain as potential sources of DNA evidence. And beyond gloves, there might be other items collected from the scene or from the surrounding area that contain DNA. Investigators do not typically disclose every piece of evidence they are analyzing because doing so could compromise the investigation or could alert suspects to what evidence exists. So the fact that we know about the glove that was ruled out and the glove still being tested does not mean those are the only items being examined. Additionally, there is some ambiguity in the reporting about whether the glove that Sheriff Nanos discussed on Wednesday is the same glove that was mentioned in earlier reporting about Nancy's case. Early reporting mentioned that a glove was found near Nancy's home, with near suggesting very close proximity, possibly on the property or immediately adjacent. The glove that Sheriff Nanos discussed is described as being approximately 2 miles from her home. 2 miles is not near in the sense that early reporting suggested. So there is a possibility that multiple gloves were found at different locations and that early reporting referred to a different glove than Sheriff Nanos discussed on Wednesday. If that is the case, if there was a glove found very close to Nancy's home in addition to the glove found 2 miles away, then the glove from very close proximity might still be undergoing testing and might still potentially contain DNA from the suspect. The reporting is not sufficiently clear to determine definitively whether there is one glove or multiple gloves at different locations. What we know for certain is that at least one glove at the 2-mile distance has been ruled out and that other gloves are still being tested in Florida. The Florida laboratory that Sheriff Nanos mentioned is significant for several reasons. First, it indicates investigators are using private forensic facilities in addition to government crime laboratories. Government crime labs operated by states or by the FBI provide forensic services to law enforcement, but they often have substantial backlogs. Cases can wait weeks or months for DNA analysis because the labs are processing evidence from multiple cases across entire jurisdictions and resources are limited relative to demand. Private forensic laboratories offer an alternative that can sometimes provide faster results. These are commercial labs that provide forensic services on a fee-for-service basis. Law enforcement agencies or families or other parties can pay to have evidence analyzed privately rather than waiting in the queue at government labs. The trade-off is cost. Private labs charge fees that can be substantial depending on the complexity of the analysis. Government labs provide services at no direct cost to individual cases, though they are funded through tax dollars. But when speed is critical and resources are available, private labs can accelerate the investigative timeline. The fact that gloves from Nancy's case are being analyzed at a private lab in Florida rather than at Arizona State Crime Labs or FBI labs suggests that either the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI or the Guthrie family or some combination has decided that getting results quickly is worth the expense of private laboratory services. That decision reflects the priority being placed on this case and the desire to pursue every lead as rapidly as possible. The choice of a Florida laboratory specifically might simply reflect that particular lab's expertise or capacity or reputation for quality work. There are several highly regarded private forensic laboratories in Florida that serve clients across the country. Or it might reflect availability, that Arizona private labs were at capacity and Florida labs could take the work more quickly. The geographic location of the lab does not particularly matter because evidence can be shipped securely and results can be transmitted electronically. What matters is that testing is ongoing and that results are expected. When those results come back, if any of the gloves still being tested contain DNA that matches or relates to a suspect rather than to an innocent explanation like the restaurant worker, that could provide the breakthrough the investigation needs. DNA that can be traced through forensic genealogy or through other means to a specific individual who has connections to Nancy or to Savannah or to the Tucson area or to planning this crime would be enormous progress. Now let me explain in more detail why finding a glove 2 miles from the crime scene and collecting it and testing it made sense investigatively, even though it ultimately turned out not to be connected to the case. Understanding this helps us understand how thorough investigations work and why eliminating possibilities is valuable even when it feels like a setback. When someone commits a crime at a specific location and then leaves that location, they create what is called an egress route or escape route. That route is the path they take from the crime scene to wherever they go next. Along that route, they might discard items that were used during the crime, but that are no longer needed. Items that connect them to the crime and that they want to get rid of. Items that are conspicuous and that they want to remove from their possession before encountering other people. Gloves are a perfect example of items that might be discarded along an egress route. If someone wore gloves during a crime to avoid leaving fingerprints on surfaces they touched, those gloves served their purpose during the crime. But once the person is away from the scene, continuing to wear gloves, especially in a climate like Tucson, where February nights are cool but not freezing, might look suspicious. Gloves in Tucson in February are not particularly unusual, but they are also not universal. Someone wearing gloves walking down a street at 3 a.m. might be noticed and remembered by a witness. So a perpetrator might remove gloves shortly after leaving the crime scene and discard them somewhere along the escape route, throwing gloves out a car window while driving away, dropping them in a trash can or in bushes along the route. That discarding removes the connection between the person and the crime, because if they are stopped or seen by witnesses, they no longer have gloves that could link them to the crime scene. But discarding items along the escape route creates evidence. Those items can be found by investigators conducting searches. If the items contain DNA or fingerprints or other identifying information, they can lead back to the perpetrator. If the items are found in multiple locations along a route, they can help establish what route the perpetrator took, which can then be correlated with camera footage or witness sightings or other evidence. So, when investigators in Nancy's case were conducting systematic searches in the area around her home, they were looking for exactly this kind of evidence, items discarded along potential escape routes, and finding a glove within 2 miles, which is a reasonable distance for someone fleeing to have reached within minutes of leaving the scene, meant that glove was worth collecting and testing. The fact that testing revealed it belonged to a restaurant worker rather than to the suspect does not mean collecting it was wrong. It means the systematic, thorough approach found something, tested it properly, and determined it was not connected. That process of elimination is valuable because now investigators know that particular glove is not relevant and they do not need to spend more resources on it. They can focus on the gloves still being tested and on other evidence. Every eliminated possibility narrows the field of what needs to be pursued. That is how investigations work. You cast a wide net, initially collecting everything that might be relevant. You test and analyze everything systematically. Some things turn out to be connected and become major leads. Some things turn out not to be connected and get eliminated. Both outcomes advance the investigation. Subscribe to True Crime Vault if you have not already. Make sure notifications are turned on. Like this video so more people see comprehensive analysis. Visit our channel for all previous coverage of Nancy's case. Comment with your thoughts on whether the glove still being tested in Florida will produce useful DNA results. Now let me discuss in detail the new ransom demand that TMZ received and what makes it fundamentally different from previous communications. TMZ reported on or around March 7th, which would be day 35 of Nancy's disappearance, that they received another ransom communication. This is the fourth ransom-related communication in this case according to the count of what has been reported publicly. Understanding the history of ransom demands in this case is important for assessing what this new one means. The first ransom notes arrived at TMZ in the days immediately following Nancy's disappearance in early February. Those initial notes were described in reporting at the time as demanding $6 million from Savannah Guthrie and her family, with a deadline of February 9th for payment. The notes provided some instructions about payment, though the details were not fully disclosed publicly. Those early notes were described as relatively crude or unsophisticated, not professionally written, not particularly detailed in their payment mechanism, just demands for a large sum of money with threats about what would happen if the money was not paid. The February 9th deadline came and went without any indication that the family paid the ransom or engaged with the demands. No announcement was made that Nancy had been released or returned. The investigation continued with Nancy still missing. That strongly suggests the ransom was not paid. Why would a family refuse to pay ransom when their loved one has been kidnapped? Because law enforcement universally advises against paying ransom for reasons I will explain in detail later. And because ransom demands without proof of life are often fake, sent by people who do not actually have the victim and cannot deliver what they claim to be selling. After the February 9th deadline passed and no payment occurred and Nancy was not returned, additional ransom communications followed. TMZ reported receiving further demands. The exact number and timing of all communications has not been fully detailed in public reporting, but references to multiple notes suggest at least 3 prior to this newest fourth one. All of the previous demands apparently maintain the same basic ask for $6 million or similar amounts. All threaten consequences if payment did not occur. None apparently included proof of life, meaning evidence that Nancy is alive and in the custody of whoever is making the demands. This newest fourth communication that TMZ received around day 35 is different from the previous ones in several important ways according to TMZ's description. First, TMZ describes it as highly sophisticated. That is a significant change from the crude or basic notes that arrived in early February. What does sophisticated mean in the context of ransom demands? It could refer to multiple aspects of how the communication is constructed and what it contains. Technical sophistication means the demand includes detailed specific instructions for payment using methods that are harder to trace than simple bank transfers or cash drops. This demand involves cryptocurrency according to TMZ, but specifically a cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is by far the most well-known cryptocurrency and is what most people think of when they hear about crypto ransom demands. Ransomware criminals who encrypt computer systems and demand payment to unlock them almost universally demand Bitcoin because it is widely available and relatively easy for victims to acquire and transfer. But Bitcoin, despite popular misconception, is not truly anonymous. Every Bitcoin transaction is recorded on a public blockchain ledger that anyone can view. While the ledger does not include names directly attached to transactions, it does create a permanent record of which Bitcoin addresses sent money to which other addresses. Law enforcement has developed sophisticated techniques for tracing Bitcoin transactions by analyzing blockchain data and by identifying where Bitcoin gets converted to traditional currency through exchanges that have identity verification requirements. There are other cryptocurrencies that offer greater privacy and anonymity than Bitcoin. Monero is one of the most well-known privacy-focused cryptocurrencies. Monero transactions do not appear on a public blockchain in the same way Bitcoin transactions do. The amounts transferred, the sender addresses, and the recipient addresses are all obscured through cryptographic techniques. That makes tracing Monero transactions much more difficult than tracing Bitcoin. Other privacy-focused cryptocurrencies include Zcash and Dash, which offer various levels of enhanced privacy features. The fact that this new ransom demand specifies a cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin suggests whoever wrote it has more knowledge of the cryptocurrency ecosystem than a typical criminal would have. Most criminals demanding crypto ransom simply demand Bitcoin because it is what they have heard of and because instructions for how to obtain and transfer Bitcoin are widely available. Specifying a less common privacy-focused cryptocurrency indicates someone has researched the options and has chosen one that offers better anonymity and resistance to tracing. That technical sophistication in cryptocurrency selection is one aspect of what makes this demand different. Another aspect of sophistication might be linguistic. If the demand is professionally written with correct grammar and spelling and well-constructed sentences, that contrasts with crude notes full of errors that suggested unsophisticated criminals. Professional quality writing suggests either someone with education and writing ability, or someone who puts substantial effort into crafting the communication carefully. Psychological sophistication is another possibility. The demand contains graphic descriptions of consequences if ransom is not paid according to TMZ. They do not specify what those descriptions say, but the use of the word graphic indicates detailed threatening content. That could mean descriptions of what will happen to Nancy or what has already happened to her. Graphic descriptions serve a psychological purpose of creating fear and urgency in the recipients, making them visualize horrible outcomes and feel desperate to prevent those outcomes by complying with the demand. Sophisticated ransom demands often include multiple types of psychological pressure. Deadlines create time pressure. Threats create fear. Detailed instructions create a sense that the sender is in control and knows what they are doing. Proof of life, if provided, creates hope that compliance will lead to the victim's return. All of these elements work together to manipulate the recipient's emotions and decision-making. If this new demand includes multiple psychological pressure tactics deployed skillfully, that would make it more sophisticated than simple crude threats. The amount demanded according to TMZ is similar to the $6 million demanded previously. That consistency is interesting. Despite the previous demands going unpaid and despite the deadline passing without compliance, the sender is maintaining the same financial ask. That could indicate stubborn insistence on a number they have settled on as appropriate. Or it could indicate genuine belief based on research into Savannah's income and the family's resources that $6 million is an amount they can realistically pay if they choose to. Savannah Guthrie, as co-anchor of the Today Show, certainly earns a substantial salary. Industry estimates for top morning show anchors suggest annual compensation in the millions of dollars, though exact figures are not publicly disclosed. Over a career spanning more than a decade at NBC, Savannah would have accumulated significant wealth. Her husband, Michael Feldman, is also successful professionally. The family resources exist to potentially pay a multi-million-dollar ransom if they decided to do so. The question is whether they would and whether they should and whether doing so would actually result in Nancy being returned safely. TMZ states that they forwarded this new communication to the FBI just as they did with previous ransom demands. The FBI would immediately begin analyzing it for any information that could help identify who sent it. Digital forensics on email communications can sometimes reveal the sender's identity even when they try to hide it. Every email contains header information showing routing details about how it traveled through internet infrastructure from sender to recipient. While sophisticated senders can obscure some of that information using anonymizing services, forensic analysis can sometimes penetrate those obfuscation techniques. The language and phrasing in the communication might be analyzed for patterns that could indicate the sender's background, education level, native language, or connections to other communications. If the same person or group sent multiple ransom demands, the writing style might show consistency across them. If the sender made any factual claims about Nancy's condition or location, those claims could be checked against what investigators know. The specification of a particular cryptocurrency could provide clues. If the cryptocurrency is relatively obscure, the number of people who would know about it and know how to use it is smaller than the number who know about Bitcoin. That narrows the suspect pool slightly. If instructions for obtaining and transferring that particular cryptocurrency are complex, that indicates someone with technical knowledge who has worked with cryptocurrency before. But the fundamental question that investigators and the family must grapple with is whether this communication is legitimate or fake. Legitimate means sent by whoever actually took Nancy and who actually has her or knows where she is and can deliver on promises to release her if ransom is paid. Fake means sent by someone unconnected to the actual abduction who is trying to exploit the situation by claiming to have Nancy when they do not. Determining legitimacy is extremely difficult without proof of life. Proof of life is evidence that the victim is alive and in the sender's custody. Standard proof of life that is used in kidnapping for ransom cases includes photographs of the victim holding a recent newspaper showing the current date, demonstrating that the photo was taken recently and that the victim is alive as of that date, or video of the victim speaking, ideally saying something specific that the recipient requests to prove the video was made in response to that request, or the victim stating information that only they would know, proving that the sender has actually communicated with the victim rather than just claiming to have them. None of the public reporting about any of the 4 ransom communications in Nancy's case mentions proof of life being provided or offered. That absence is highly significant. It strongly suggests that these communications might all be fake, sent by opportunists who saw the massive media coverage of Nancy's disappearance and saw an opportunity to try to extract money by claiming to be involved when they actually are not. Fake ransom demands are unfortunately common in high-profile kidnapping cases. When a case receives national or international media attention, numerous people unconnected to the crime send communications claiming to have the victim or to know where the victim is. Some do it hoping to receive money. Some do it to insert themselves into the investigation for attention or psychological satisfaction. Some do it to mislead investigators and waste resources. Law enforcement in major cases receives dozens or hundreds of these fake communications and has to evaluate each one to determine whether it might be legitimate. Without proof of life, there is no way to distinguish between a legitimate communication from someone who actually has Nancy and a fake communication from someone just claiming to have her. That is why proof of life is standard protocol in actual kidnapping for ransom situations. Legitimate kidnappers understand they need to prove they have what they claim to have in order to make their demands credible. The fact that 4 communications have been sent and none has included proof of life suggests either the sender is inexperienced and does not understand how this works, or the sender cannot provide proof of life because they do not actually have Nancy. The sophistication of this 4th communication does not necessarily indicate it is more likely to be legitimate than the earlier crude ones. Someone who is faking a ransom demand could study how professional ransomware criminals or organized crime groups handle kidnapping for ransom. They could read about cryptocurrency privacy features and choose Monero or another privacy coin. They could craft professional-sounding language and include graphic descriptions of consequences. Sophistication indicates knowledge and effort, but does not prove the sender has Nancy or knows where she is. True Crime Vault provides ongoing, comprehensive factual coverage of developing cases. Subscribe now. Turn on all notifications. Like this video. Visit our channel for previous comprehensive coverage. Comment below with your assessment of whether this ransom demand is legitimate or fake. And if you have information, contact the FBI immediately. Now let me discuss what law enforcement typically advises about ransom demands and why the Guthrie family appears to be following that advice. Law enforcement agencies across the United States and around the world universally advise families not to pay ransom demands in kidnapping cases for multiple interconnected reasons that are based on decades of experience with these situations. Understanding those reasons helps explain why the Guthrie family has apparently not paid, despite receiving multiple demands over 5 weeks. First reason, payment does not guarantee the victim's safe return. When someone pays ransom to kidnappers, the kidnappers receive money, but they still possess the victim. At that point, releasing the victim alive creates enormous risk for the kidnappers. The victim can identify them if they saw their captors. The victim can describe the location where they were held, which could lead to evidence. The victim can testify against them in court. The victim alive and free represents the single greatest threat to the kidnappers avoiding capture and prosecution. From a purely rational criminal perspective, once ransom is paid, the kidnappers are better off killing the victim than releasing them. Dead victims cannot identify perpetrators, cannot testify, cannot provide evidence. That grim reality means that paying ransom might actually increase the likelihood that the victim will be killed rather than released. Of course, not all kidnappers follow that ruthless logic. Some do release victims after receiving payment, either because they have moral limits or because they fear that killing would bring more severe investigation and prosecution. But the point is that payment does not guarantee release and might actually endanger the victim further. Second reason, payment funds criminal activity and encourages additional crimes. When kidnappers successfully receive ransom payments, that success demonstrates that kidnapping is profitable. It encourages those same criminals to kidnap again. It encourages other criminals who observe the success to attempt similar crimes. Every successful ransom payment creates incentive for more kidnappings. That is why law enforcement takes the position that paying ransom is not just a decision affecting one case, but a decision that affects the broader incentive structure for this category of crime. Third reason, Ransom payments can be traced, and that tracing can lead to arrests. Criminals often believe that cryptocurrency payments cannot be traced and that they can receive ransom anonymously. But law enforcement has developed sophisticated techniques for tracing cryptocurrency transactions. Bitcoin blockchain analysis can track payments from victim to perpetrator. Privacy coins like Monero are harder to trace but not impossible. And at some point, criminals need to convert cryptocurrency into traditional currency to actually use it for purchasing goods and services. That conversion typically happens through cryptocurrency exchanges that have identity verification requirements under anti-money laundering regulations. When large sums of cryptocurrency are converted to cash or traditional currency, that creates records. Law enforcement working with exchanges can often identify who received ransom payments even when the initial payment was made in privacy-focused cryptocurrency. Those identifications lead to arrests and prosecutions. Many kidnapping for ransom schemes have been solved through tracing ransom payments. Fourth reason, many ransom demands, especially in high-profile cases, are fake. As I explained earlier, opportunists unconnected to actual crimes send fake ransom demands, trying to exploit situations. Paying a fake ransom demand gives money to someone who does not have your loved one and who cannot return them even if they wanted to. The family loses money and gets nothing in return. And the actual perpetrators who do have the victim see that the family paid someone else and might escalate their own demands or might kill the victim believing that payment has been made even though it did not reach them. For all of these reasons, FBI and other law enforcement agencies advise families not to pay ransom demands. That advice creates an impossible emotional situation for families. On one hand, law enforcement is telling them that paying is dangerous and counterproductive and likely will not result in the victim's return. On the other hand, refusing to pay means refusing what might be the only chance to get their loved one back if the demand is legitimate and if the kidnappers would actually release the victim upon receiving payment. The Guthrie family's decision, which appears based on the lack of any indication that payment has been made, to not pay the ransom demands represents following law enforcement advice, even though that must be emotionally excruciating. They are refusing to give money to someone who might have Nancy on the recommendation of professionals who have experience with these cases. Whether that decision is ultimately proven right or tragically wrong, it is the decision that FBI would universally recommend. Now let me discuss Savannah Guthrie's return to the Today Show studio and what it reveals about how she and her family are coping with 5 weeks of not knowing where Nancy is. On Thursday, March 6th, day 34 of her mother's disappearance, Savannah returned to the Today Show studio in New York City for the first time since Nancy went missing on February 1st. She did not appear on air as co-anchor, resuming her normal role. She did not appear in front of cameras or address the millions of viewers who watch Today every morning. But she came to the studio physically to be with her colleagues and to thank them for their support during the most difficult period of her life. A spokesperson for the Today Show provided a statement to Fox News Digital explaining the visit and its significance. The statement said that Savannah Guthrie stopped by the studio that morning to be with her Today colleagues and to thank them. The phrasing "stopped by" suggests this was not a return to work, but rather a visit, a brief appearance to reconnect rather than resuming her regular daily presence. The statement emphasized that while Savannah plans to eventually return to the program on air, she remains focused right now on supporting her family and working to help bring Nancy home. That carefully worded statement contains multiple important messages. Plans to eventually return indicate Savannah intends to resume her career and her co-anchor role. She is not retiring. She is not stepping away permanently from Today. But eventually, rather than immediately or soon, indicates the timeline is not determined and depends on circumstances, including hopefully Nancy being found, and also including Savannah's emotional readiness to return to the demands of live television. Remains focused right now on supporting her family. Acknowledges that Savannah's priority is not professional right now. It is personal and familial. Her family is dealing with trauma. Her mother is missing. Her focus is there rather than on television news. Working to help bring Nancy home is particularly significant phrasing because it indicates active ongoing effort. The family is not passively waiting for law enforcement to find Nancy. They are working, participating, contributing to the effort to bring her home. What that work consists of is not specified, but it could include coordinating with investigators, reviewing evidence, reaching out to media to keep the case in public attention, following up on tips, and numerous other activities that families in these situations often engage in. This Thursday studio visit followed a Monday visit to Nancy's home in Tucson, where Savannah was seen with family members placing flowers in front of the house. That Monday visit showed Savannah spending time at the physical location where her mother lived and where she was taken. There is something about being in the place connected to a missing loved one that many families find meaningful, even if they cannot articulate exactly why. It is a connection to the person, to their life, to the reality of what happened. Placing flowers is a gesture of love and remembrance and hope. Later that same Monday, Savannah shared a post on her Instagram account with a message to the public that has been following her mother's case. The message said in part that the family feels the love and prayers from supporters and asked people to please not stop praying and having hope with them. That Instagram message is revealing about Savannah's emotional state 5 weeks into this ordeal. She is asking people to continue praying. That indicates prayer is important to her and her family. Continue having hope indicates that hope is something she is actively maintaining even after 33 days without finding her mother. Hope after 5 weeks of a missing person case involving an 84-year-old woman who disappeared under circumstances suggesting abduction is difficult to maintain from an objective standpoint. Statistics on missing persons cases are not encouraging after this much time has passed. But hope is not about statistics. Hope is about refusing to accept the worst possibility until proof makes it unavoidable. Savannah asking the public to maintain hope with her family suggests they are not ready to give up on the possibility that Nancy is alive and can be found and brought home. Whether that hope is realistic or whether it represents a family clinging to possibility in the face of grim odds, we cannot determine from outside. What we can observe is that Savannah publicly is maintaining hope and asking others to do the same. That has psychological value for her and for her family, even if the objective likelihood is low. Hope allows them to keep functioning and keep pushing for investigation and keep believing that their efforts might matter. Thursday's visit to the Today studio represents a step toward re-engaging with her professional life, even while her focus remains on her personal crisis. The Today Show is not just Savannah's workplace. It is a place where she has spent over a decade. She became co-anchor in 2012. That is more than 12 years of arriving at that studio 5 mornings a week, working with the same colleagues, building relationships, creating professional family. Those colleagues are people who know her well, who have worked alongside her through good times and bad, who care about her as a person, not just as a co-worker. Visiting them to thank them for their support makes complete emotional sense. When you are going through trauma, having people who care about you and support you is invaluable. Savannah's Today Show colleagues have presumably been reaching out to her, sending messages, offering help, expressing care and concern. Going to the studio to thank them in person, rather than just through messages or calls, represents acknowledging that support in a more meaningful way. The fact that Today released a statement about the visit rather than keeping it completely private suggests Savannah wanted the public to know she is coping, is grateful for support, and is maintaining hope while making clear her priority remains finding her mother. That communication to the public serves multiple purposes. It keeps Nancy's case in public awareness, which is important for generating tips and maintaining pressure for the investigation to continue intensively. It shows Savannah is functioning, which might relieve some concern among Today Show viewers who care about her, and it models strength and hope, which might inspire others facing difficult situations. Subscribe to True Crime Vault for ongoing coverage. Turn on all notifications. Like this video. Visit our channel. Comment below with your thoughts. Contact FBI or Pima County Sheriff if you have information. $1 million plus additional rewards remain available for information that leads to finding Nancy or to arrest and conviction of whoever took her. Now let me discuss what the ongoing investigative activities tell us about where the case stands on day 35 and what investigators are still looking for. Fox 10 Phoenix reported that on Thursday, March 6th, the same day Savannah visited the Today Show studio in New York, investigators were conducting door-to-door searches in Nancy's neighborhood in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson. Door-to-door work 34 days into a case indicates investigators are still actively canvassing, still asking residents questions, still seeking information from people who live in the area where Nancy disappeared. This activity could represent several things. It could be follow-up interviews with residents who were interviewed during the initial canvassing in the first days after Nancy disappeared. Follow-up interviews often ask different questions than initial interviews because investigators have learned more about the case and have specific information they want to check. If someone mentions seeing a vehicle during the first interview, follow-up might ask for more specific description of that vehicle, or ask if the person has thought of any additional details since the first conversation. It could be interviews with residents who were not home during initial canvassing and have not been contacted yet. Even thorough initial canvassing often misses some residents who are traveling or working when investigators come by. Continued door-to-door work reaches those people eventually. It could be canvassing areas that were not included in the initial search radius. If the initial canvass focused on homes within a mile of Nancy's house and is now expanding to homes within 2 miles, that represents systematic widening of the search area as initial efforts are completed. Or it could be canvassing specifically about new information that has developed. If camera footage analysis identified a vehicle of interest, investigators might be going door to door asking if anyone recognizes that vehicle or has seen it in the area. If other evidence pointed to specific dates or times as significant, investigators might ask residents about those specific times. Whatever the specific purpose of the Thursday door-to-door work, the fact that it is happening on day 34 indicates the investigation remains active with investigators on the ground pursuing leads rather than sitting in offices waiting for laboratory results or tips. Active investigation with visible presence in the neighborhood also reassures residents that law enforcement has not given up and is still working the case intensively. The use of metal detectors inside Nancy's home is also significant according to Fox 10 reporting. People arrived at the Guthrie home with metal detectors to search for jewelry or small objects that might have fallen during the abduction. Metal detectors can locate items that visual searches would miss because those items are buried in carpet fibers, fallen into crevices between furniture and walls, or otherwise concealed in ways that eyes alone cannot detect. Why would investigators be looking for jewelry specifically? There are several investigative reasons. If Nancy was wearing jewelry when she was taken, pieces might have fallen off or broken during struggle or during the process of being moved. A necklace with a clasp could break if grabbed or pulled. Earrings can fall out. Bracelets can slip off. Rings can come off if hands are grabbed or restrained. Finding jewelry from Nancy in specific locations within the house could tell investigators where struggle occurred or where Nancy was when certain things happened. If jewelry is found in locations outside the house, such as in the yard or in the driveway or on the street, that could indicate the path the suspect took when removing Nancy from the property. Jewelry found farther from the house could potentially mark the escape route. Small metal objects beyond jewelry could also be relevant. If the suspect dropped anything metal, a tool or a key or any item, metal detectors could locate it. If Nancy had metal on her clothing like zippers or snaps or buttons, pieces that came off could be found. The fact that this metal detector search is happening on day 34 indicates several things about the investigation. First, investigators are still processing the crime scene, which is Nancy's home and property. They are still looking for physical evidence that initial searches might have missed. That thoroughness is positive because it means the investigation has not given up on finding evidence at the primary location. But it also indicates that initial searches did not produce enough evidence to solve the case immediately, requiring more detailed and technologically assisted follow-up work. Second, investigators believe there might be small items worth finding. If they thought the crime scene had been thoroughly processed and nothing more could be found, they would not invest time and resources in metal detector searches. The decision to use metal detectors indicates assessment that small metal objects might exist that could provide valuable information. Third, the investigation has the resources and priority to conduct this level of detailed searching. Metal detector searches require personnel, equipment, and time. The fact that these resources are being devoted to Nancy's case 5 weeks in indicates this remains a high-priority investigation, receiving substantial support from Pima County Sheriff's Department and FBI. Additionally, Fox 10 reported that the vehicle belonging to Annie Guthrie, Nancy's daughter and Savannah's sister, was returned to the family on Tuesday, March 4th. That vehicle had presumably been taken by investigators earlier in the investigation for forensic examination. Forensic examination of vehicles typically includes searching for physical evidence like fingerprints, DNA, fibers, or any items that might be relevant. It includes documenting the vehicle's condition, and it might include analyzing digital evidence from the vehicle, if it has systems that record data like GPS navigation history or event data recorders. The fact that Annie's vehicle is being returned suggests forensic examination is complete and either found nothing relevant or found evidence that has been documented and photographed and collected such that the vehicle itself is no longer needed. If the vehicle contained critical evidence that required holding it for longer-term analysis or for potential use in trial, it would not be returned yet. The return suggests either it is not central to the case or examination is sufficiently complete that the family can have it back. All of these ongoing activities, door-to-door canvassing continuing on day 34, metal detector searches inside Nancy's home, vehicle examinations and returns, indicate an investigation that remains active and that is still gathering evidence and pursuing leads even as some leads like the DNA from one glove are being eliminated. The investigation has not stopped. It has not gone cold in the sense of being inactive. Resources are still being devoted to systematic investigative work appropriate to where the case stands 5 weeks in. Now I need to address the question that everyone following this case is asking, and that is difficult to answer honestly. After 35 days, what are the realistic chances that Nancy Guthrie is still alive? What are the realistic chances that she will be found? And what should we understand about the statistical realities of missing persons cases, while also acknowledging that statistics describe populations, not individuals, and that individual cases can defy statistical expectations? This is an extremely difficult subject to discuss because it involves facing grim realities about probabilities while not wanting to eliminate hope for Nancy's family, who are asking the public to maintain hope with them. But honesty about what statistics tell us is important for understanding where this case stands. Statistics on missing persons, particularly missing persons who are elderly and who disappeared under circumstances suggesting abduction rather than voluntary departure, are not encouraging after 35 days have passed. The first hours and days after disappearance are the most critical period for finding missing persons alive. The probability of live recovery decreases significantly with each day that passes. By the time a case reaches 5 weeks, the statistical probability of finding the person alive is low. Why does probability decrease over time? For several interconnected reasons. If someone is being held against their will, the physical and psychological stress increases with time. An 84-year-old woman like Nancy has medical needs and vulnerabilities that younger people do not have. She may require medications for various conditions that elderly people commonly manage: blood pressure medication, diabetes medication, heart medication. Going without those medications for 5 weeks could be life-threatening. She needs proper nutrition, which becomes difficult in captivity situations. She needs basic sanitation and hygiene, which affects health over extended periods. If Nancy is being held somewhere by whoever took her, keeping her alive for 35 days requires providing medical care, providing food and water, providing minimally sanitary conditions. That is not impossible, but it requires ongoing effort and resources from the captor. The longer someone holds a captive, the more risk that captivity creates for the captor, including risk of discovery, and risk that the captive might escape or that their location might be identified. The ransom demands suggest that whoever took Nancy might be motivated by money and might want to keep her alive as leverage for payment. If the goal is financial gain through ransom, killing the victim before receiving payment eliminates the leverage and eliminates the possibility of collecting money. That logic would suggest keeping Nancy alive as long as hope of payment exists. But 4 ransom demands have been sent over 5 weeks, and none has resulted in payment as far as public information indicates. If the demands are legitimate from someone who actually has Nancy, the lack of payment after multiple attempts might lead that person to conclude payment will not happen, and that keeping Nancy alive no longer serves their purposes. That grim logic could lead to harm even if initial intent was to keep her alive for ransom. If the ransom demands are fake from people who do not actually have Nancy, then they tell us nothing about whether she is alive or where she is. The actual perpetrator who took her might have entirely different motivations than the fake ransom senders. The lack of proof of life in any of the ransom communications is concerning. Legitimate kidnappers who want payment typically provide proof of life to demonstrate they can deliver what they claim to be selling. The absence of proof of life across 4 communications suggests either the senders are incompetent and do not understand how kidnapping for ransom works, or they cannot provide proof because Nancy is not alive or because they do not actually have her. The lack of recovery of remains is somewhat more encouraging. Despite extensive searches including the Day 30 search in Arizona desert based on cell tower coordinates, and presumably other searches that have not been publicly reported, no remains have been found, or at least no findings have been announced publicly. If Nancy had been killed and left in a location that has been searched, remains would likely have been found unless concealment was extraordinarily effective. The fact that searches have not produced remains could mean she is alive somewhere that has not been searched. Or it could mean her remains are in a location that has not been searched yet, or that has been searched but where they remain concealed. Savannah's Instagram message asking people to continue praying and having hope indicates the family maintains hope, or at least maintains the appearance of hope publicly. Families often maintain hope longer than objective evidence would support, because the alternative of accepting the worst is unbearable. But that hope, whether realistic or aspirational, shows the family has not given up emotionally even after 5 weeks. The investigation continues on multiple assumptions simultaneously. Investigators are presumably working on the assumption that Nancy might still be alive, and finding her quickly remains critical. But they are also presumably working on the assumption that she might not be alive, and that the investigation might be focused on recovery of remains and on building a case for prosecution even without recovering Nancy. Both tracks can be pursued simultaneously. The realistic assessment based on statistics and based on the specifics of this case is that the probability Nancy is alive decreases with each passing day, and that after 35 days, that probability is low, though not zero. The realistic assessment is that hopes for a reunion where Nancy is found alive and returned to her family are fading, though have not disappeared completely. And the realistic assessment is that the investigation is likely now focused as much on identifying who took Nancy and building a case for prosecution as it is on rescue and recovery. That honest assessment of probabilities does not mean giving up hope entirely. Statistics describe what happens on average across many cases. Individual cases can be exceptions. There have been cases where missing persons were found alive after weeks or months or even years. Those cases are rare, but they exist as proof that recovery is possible even when probabilities are low. Elizabeth Smart was found alive 9 months after being kidnapped from her home. J.C. Dugard was found alive 18 years after being abducted. Those are extreme examples, and the circumstances differed from Nancy's case in many ways, but they demonstrate that statistical improbability is not the same as impossibility. So while being honest that chances are low, we can also acknowledge that low is not zero, and that Nancy's family asking people to maintain hope is not irrational, even if it might be aspirational. Hope serves psychological purposes for families, even when objective analysis suggests hope is fading, and cases do sometimes resolve in ways that defy statistical expectations. True Crime Vault will continue covering Nancy Guthrie's case, providing factual updates and honest analysis as developments occur. Subscribe for ongoing, comprehensive coverage that respects both the need for factual accuracy and the sensitivity of a family dealing with trauma. Turn on all notifications. Like this video. Visit our channel for all previous coverage. Comment with your thoughts on whether Nancy is alive after 35 days and whether the new ransom demand represents legitimate communication or another fake attempt. And most importantly, if you have any information at all, any observations from February 1st or the surrounding days, any knowledge of suspicious activity in the Catalina foothills, any awareness of people who showed unusual interest in Nancy or in Savannah, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900 immediately. $1 million from the Guthrie family, plus additional FBI and Crime Stoppers rewards totaling over $1,200,000, remain available for information that leads to finding Nancy or to the arrest and conviction of whoever took her. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, mother of Today Show co-anchor Savannah Guthrie, has been missing for 35 days as of March 7, 2026. The DNA from one glove found near her home does not match the suspect and has been traced to a restaurant worker with no connection to her case. But other gloves are still being tested at a private laboratory in Florida, with results pending. A new highly sophisticated ransom demand has been received by TMZ involving a privacy-focused cryptocurrency and containing graphic threats. But like the 3 previous ransom communications, it apparently contains no proof of life, raising serious questions about legitimacy. Savannah Guthrie has returned to the Today Show studio for the first time since her mother disappeared, thanking colleagues while maintaining focus on efforts to bring Nancy home, and asking the public through Instagram to continue praying and having hope even after 5 weeks without resolution. Investigators continue active work with door-to-door canvassing on day 34 and metal detector searches inside Nancy's home looking for small items of evidence that might have been missed, while the vehicle belonging to Nancy's daughter Annie has been returned to the family, suggesting forensic examination is complete. The case remains unsolved. No suspect has been publicly identified. No arrests have been made. Nancy has not been found, but the investigation continues with resources devoted to following every lead, testing every piece of potential evidence, and pursuing every possibility. The search for Nancy Guthrie continues. The effort to identify who took her continues. And True Crime Vault will be here providing comprehensive factual coverage until this case reaches resolution and until Nancy's family gets the answers they deserve and the justice that an 84-year-old woman taken from her home in the middle of the night deserves.